I mean, to some extent, as we kind of reach this kind of multi-chain environment, there's a little bit of a dilution of attention, meaning like before Ethereum was NFTs and you had all of the attention on like OpenSea, versus now there's ordinals, or there's whatever's going on Solana. It's kind of becoming more fractionalized across all the different places. And so I'm paying attention to more places. So it's just more and more you have to kind of keep up with, and more options you have to kind of prioritize of, if I'm going to do, a new music-based NFT, where would that go? So
Hmm.
it's different things that I'd like to explore within the medium itself, but then also different things I'm excited about.
And we're live. Hello, Ryan. So great to see you.
Hey, Kaloh, what's up?
All good, all good. Thanks for doing this. I know you're moving and you have a little bit of a cold, right?
Yeah, just a small touch of COVID that I'm recovering from, just about back to good. It's like we're so back, like you're back when like COVID's coming back.
Yeah,
Everything's coming
I,
back.
I had COVID a month ago. It was like really aggressive, but I also got, well in like two days. So it was my
Oh
first
wow.
time. I didn't have it
Oh
before,
wow.
so it's kind of surprising.
This is my second rodeo with it. So first time was rough, second time was rough, but takes me down for a few weeks and then I bounce back.
Nice. Well, Ryan, so good to have you. I mean, you are a very prolific, right? Artist, generative artist. I'm really impressed with the quality of your work and how you have been, in a short amount of time, been able to produce so many high quality collections in different galleries, marketplaces, however you want to call them. So I want to learn a little bit about you and how you accomplish that, because you are also a front end developer, right? You are leading the front end from a company working in analytics, so that's also quite interesting. And where let's start from there, Ryan. Like, can you tell us a bit about your background? How did you got into crypto? How did you got into development? How did you
Sure.
start in the tech space?
It's one of those things where people see like your most recent work and you're like, how did you do this, so quickly? Like you just started on it a few months ago. But it's one of those things too where like you've been going and going and going like these, you know, long work weeks for decades and decades on obscure, like random like graphic experiments and just little, hobbyist projects. And then finally, with, the way crypto's taken this kind of direction towards all these generative projects, now there's this platform that I can kind of release work on. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like I've been chipping away at it, and I have a lot of things that I've kind of put in various drawers. And there's a lot of like half finished, scaffolds here and there. That now that there is kind of this, like I said, this platform, this distribution channel of people who care about it, then it gives me kind of this ability to now start to publish things and start to revisit, old chunks of various parts
Yeah.
that I have that I can combine with new ideas and then just kind of get it out there relatively quickly. But I think if you see like the full arc, it's like, wow, this guy's been working on this forever. So it's
Yeah.
kind of that both,
Uh,
sides of the same coin.
yeah. No, that I think that's the case for many artists, generative artists, right? If you look at somebody like Casey Reas, right? He has been working decades with computers, and there
Yeah.
are many more to name. And then suddenly, like the blockchain was the perfect fit for their work, right? Because I mean, it solves so many issues, distribution, of course, but also
Sure.
it it's like perfect for
And just
authentication,
demand.
right? Yeah,
Like just
demand.
the demand's great that people care, because for a long time, like you could have done it, but I don't know like who would have seen it. Where now we do have the attention of the market,
Hmm.
and those have been kind of working at it now can be seen, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's true. And Ryan, when did you start coding? Because you are also a front end developer. You're leading a team of we'll talk about that. But did you study computer science? You had an engineering background, or did you learn that later on? What's the story on your technical, let's say the technical path?
I've been coding for a very long time. I think I got my first program written when I was maybe like 7 or 8 years old on like an old basic like I don't know,
Mm.
486 PC, and I was hooked. It was like the first program was like, enter your name. If name equals my sister, then, go to 10, go to 10, go to 10, get off the computer, go to 10, get off the computer. So I've always just felt that fascination and that drive toward, app making, software engineering, entrepreneurial design, that kind of thing, since as far back as I can remember. But again, it's more and more of that, like there's more of a spotlight on it. More people care now. There's that attention, where back then it was kind of like this obscure nerdy thing that my brother did, versus, now it's like, oh, you're a developer, developers, developers, developers.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of cool, again, to have kind of been in the right place at the right time, and to have had the right fascinations for kind of where the whole market and the world was moving. Set me up, I think, with a bit of an advantage, just as addicted as I was to the technology back then, and just stayed this entire time.
Mhm.
So just all of that has kind of put me in the right place. In college, I tried to take computer science, but they wanted me to take all these prerequisites, and I should have audited it, and I probably could have, but it was just like a lot of, I felt, obscure things that I didn't really want to study, and I kind of felt like if I could just take the test, I could probably be like at least on like the third class or whatever, because I've worked for companies doing the things you're teaching us. But
Mhm.
anyway, I ended up studying music composition in college just because it was an easier thing,
Mm.
fewer hoops to jump through. So I played in, the classical guitar ensemble, and then that got me in with radio and television music production. And then I followed that to doing work with Clear Channel. And then it was kind of funny because at the time I was going really deep into the arts, but kind of putting the
Mhm.
technology kind of on the sidelines, kind of on hold, because I felt like I come from technology, but I don't come from the arts. That was my perspective as kind of this, you know, I don't know,
Yeah.
just computer nerd at the time. So anyway, getting in with radio and TV, again, the market moved to web. So in the beginning, as we were doing ads for, different jingles and things like that, it started to become more and more doing websites, and less radio jingles, less radio ads, less TV ads, more web ads, and more social. So then that kind of got me early on. The company I was working for, we were doing these radio things, but you could see the whole market is shifting to micro targeting. It's shifting to social. And again, it was just kind of right place, right time to kind of follow my
Yeah.
passions. And it just drove me into web development. And then from there, hooking up with Upshot, they were looking for people that could, look at a Figma and then take that design and turn it into user interface components, think through, various UX challenges. And I was just kind of the right guy at the right time.
Nice. Yeah, that's it's quite interesting because you come from an artistic background actually when you think about it with music and TV and audio, and then you came back to kind of to move again back to tech, but then again
Yeah.
to the art. So it's kind of you're going back
Yeah,
and
I
forth
keep
with both.
rediscovering both a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
and trying to find new ways to kind of combine them as their nature changes over time.
Hmm.
Now it's
Hmm.
AI. Technology is AI, where it wasn't, 2 years ago.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, and you also have done works with AI, right? I've seen a couple of your experimentations, right? So yeah, it makes sense. You kind of keep moving depending on the technology. That's quite interesting. And Ryan, how is it? Because you are, I
Blow
mean, you
my
have a
nose.
full-time job.
I do. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
everything just keeps moving and moving and moving. So
But
I'm one of these kind of workaholic types
mm,
where I don't feel comfortable unless I have at least a few things up in the air that I'm juggling. So definitely need that full-time job, just keeping kind of the lights on, the stability. But then, at night, I'm always jamming on code, trying new experiments,
mhm.
balancing that equation.
And do you think there are some advantages, like you're coding for your job, of course, but then you come back to, art, generative art, but you have to at some point disconnect from your art projects, right? Because you have to go back to your work stuff. And do you think that helps you in a way to I don't know, disconnect a bit and get different ideas? Is it?
Yeah,
Have you thought about that?
it's a lot of when I'm working on my own stuff, no one knows why. Like it's very obscure itches that you scratch of, I think this would be just interesting to see where this goes, and I'll start working on it. And it's only later when you have a various, task from your employer where you can go, hey, I've explored, the depths of that random like rabbit hole. You guys are wanting to kind of explore, and I can kind of bring some insight, some wisdom from this random thing that I did that was kind of tangential to that.
Hmm. Yeah, and the work with Upshot, I mean, you are working on design and front end development, so that's I guess I mean how I see it, and maybe I'm wrong, but you are designing UI UX experiences and putting them together, like building those. So in a way, there is a little
Yeah.
bit of design and kind of a creativity involved in there, right?
Yeah, I can't take full credit. We have like a great designer, Igor, who, he comes up with, this is how this is going to look. This is going to take up 2/3 of the space. This will, collapse down to a 1D column on mobile. Like he thinks through a lot of these edge cases, and I kind of work with him and then the rest of the team to figure out, how do we actually get people using this? How do we smooth the edges? Because there's always rough edges in Web3, as I'm sure you're
Hmm.
aware.
Yeah, yeah, no, that
So
makes
it's just trying
sense.
to make that feel better for people, than whatever I can contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, and I guess in your job, I mean, it's different from your artistic, let's say, practice, because you in your job you're working with different people, you're communicating, you're working together towards something. There are
Yeah.
discussions. But when you work on your art, I think the other day we were chatting and you said you are mostly working alone, right? Is that the case?
Yeah.
And do you feel
Yeah,
like,
when I
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, definitely I've only worked on a generative project with another individual one time, and it was a total blast. But in general, yeah, it is just me, middle of the night working on
Mhm.
some obscure problem versus like at work, it's a team, we have sprint planning, there's check-ins, there's linear task boards, and
Yeah,
various things you have to do to kind of keep everybody working together. That just isn't the case when you're able to work on kind of these art projects where you just kind of do whatever you want.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, I guess it's a place for experimentation, and it's
Yes,
part
and
of
learning.
being
Yeah.
an artist, right? Like it's yourself alone. You know, you can. Do you usually talk to other generative artists, or is it usually yourself? Like you get feedback. Do you ask for, hey, what do you think about this before releasing something, or not really? You have like a close group of artists to chat about things.
Have the same, I'm sure, Discord list most people have of you'll pop in. It's a longer and longer list over time, but
Mhm.
just pop into fxhash and art blocks and just various places and talk to the people who are collecting, who are creating. But then there's also a cool Slack group I was invited into from a bunch of the heavyweights, and everybody just kind of goes a little more like kind of into kind of the challenges and kind of
Mhm.
behind the scenes work there. And then I'm in the proof room, and then there's like even like internal proof artist rooms. So I'm in kind of these various channels, but I do think a lot of it's even just like just bouncing things on Twitter. So
Right.
yeah, definitely. I love talking to other artists and just kind of bouncing things off of them. I
Yeah.
try to be good about if someone does, a killer drop, just send them a DM and just, props.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like the getting the recognition right from other artists in the medium when you release something and somebody DMs you, hey, that was a great drop. When it comes from an artist, I feel I'm not an artist, but I feel like that hits differently, right, than when it's
Yeah.
collectors, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not doing it for the money, like that's one of the reasons why you're doing it, is just to kind of connect. So
Mhm.
it's very cool.
Yeah, Ryan. And then, well, you mentioned these different groups you are in, right? And that's because you are one of the unique artists that have been able to work with so many platforms, right? And marketplaces and galleries. And I would like to learn a bit about that journey. I think, if I'm not wrong, it all started on fxhash. That's at least how I got to see your art for the first time. Um,
Yeah.
so
I mean, I
how did
think
that happen?
I had definitely experimented before then, but I think at fxhash was when kind of my version 1.0 hit. Of like, I think I know the format that people are interested in, from kind of like what Chromie Squiggles taught us of how you
Mhm.
set up your traits, how you set up rarities, how you want to have, you know, different sub collections within a larger arcing vision. Where maybe before then I was just like, here's a cool thing I made on, in Photoshop, just blast that out to Rarible, no one's really
Mhm.
that interested. But fxhash was when I was really able to kind of put all the pieces together, think long form, get it packaged, make sure, everything, all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted, and then publish it. And
Yeah.
that was kind of my first, version 1.0 of my generative art as organized chaos. So
Yeah.
that was, a cool moment for me.
Yeah. And
And I
then
didn't think anything of it. I just kind of put it out there and then just kind of just went back to whatever else I was doing. And then only kind of through feedback and iteration do you kind of close that loop of, okay, here's where I can go next.
And do you think was there like a moment when things changed that you started to get, like clearly more recognition or more visibility that you said you experienced that hype and was there like a particular point in time that do you recall a particular collection maybe or a moment in time when that happened?
Yeah, I think definitely for me, it was when I dropped Fragments of a Wave.
Yeah.
That one hit a little different than ones I had done before, where for that one, it was still one of these things where I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't announce, there's no hype about a drop date. There's no preview images. I was just like messing around with it. And then I dropped it like middle of the night before I went to bed. And then woke up the next day, tried to mint some, and I couldn't because like people had already minted it out. So I was a little annoyed,
Wow.
like I can't even get my own work. So then I just bought some on secondary, and then I started getting, tweets and various DMs, and
Yeah.
then that just kind of blew up, and then really fueled the addiction of wow, now I got to make more.
Mhm.
Again, there's a platform, there's a market for this, where it's not as much
Right.
fun to create without that.
Yeah, it keeps you in a way motivated, right? Because people are paying attention in a way, and also
Yeah,
you want to see what happens, right? Like what's the it's like a bit of a I guess like a drug, right? You want to see what
yeah,
happens, right? Like
dopamine.
adrenaline, dopamine, yeah.
Yes.
And what do you think was special about fragments? What the collector tell you in general? What did they tell you and other artists? What do you think was special about it?
A lot of people felt that it had this, large variety, diversity within what they viewed as a single algorithm. Kind of behind the scenes, it's really a few algorithms that are just kind of randomly shuffled. There's kind of a large type, there's a small type, there's a medium type. And by having kind of those three kind of subtypes within the fragments, you get this really diverse looking landscape. And it was kind of when I had figured out ways to really kind of juice more outputs out of the permutations to where you really do get some like unique looking outputs. So that was kind of, I think, the big takeaway for me on Fragments was that people crave
Mhm.
variety, and it's almost like you can feel the not necessarily the intent, but you can feel kind of the passion, you can feel the care that went into the project, and
Mhm.
that care kind of manifests as this variety, and
Right.
people are kind of a little jaded against kind of these quick, like that's kind of the whole critique of AI is, but you didn't, you made it without having to put a ton of care into it, you did it so quickly, where I think that variety was kind of a sign of there was a lot of care put into this.
Right. It sounds like there was a lot of care into the architecture, let's call it, of the algorithms and how to produce this high amount of variety and in a way that it still feels smooth, right? It feels like, wow, this is crazy. There are so many different outputs, but it still belongs to one
Yeah,
collection, right? Still you can recognize that. Yeah, that's yeah, also for me was the first time when I saw your work was with Fragments, and I think it's one of the top 10 all-time collections on fxhash, right? It must be top 20. Um, so that's
top 1,000
exciting.
maybe. Yeah, no, it's yeah, very cool to see. Very cool to see.
Yeah, and then from there, Ryan, you kept working on a couple of more collections. I also remember Sprocket. Is that the name? Spock Factory? Sprocket
Yeah,
Factory.
yeah, Sprocket Factory, yes.
Right.
That was a fun one. That one's very obviously inspired by kind of the goats on Ethereum, Dmitri and Tyler,
Hmm.
just really showing us how to do it. And then it was just kind of my spin on it, like often what I like to see is just kind of this over the top complexity of like once you kind of set up these rules and you kind of set up the system that it can kind of run itself, what's it look like when you just overdrive it and really just overclock the thing until it's packing every crevice? And
Okay.
that was kind of like, what if you take Ringers and Fidenza? They had like a love child, and that love child was, just like
Yeah.
you know, an insane person.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that also had a lot of, it was, the reception on that one was also crazy, crazy good. And I think from there, you I mean, you released one. I also remember Dreamcatcher, right? Dreamcatcher Forest. And
Yeah,
then you had a drop with together with fxhash for Art Basel, right? That's kind of a group
yeah.
show that was organized. How was that? How was that experience, Ryan? Because it was the first time that you were invited to a show. Is that right? It was the first time.
Yeah, the first one was Dreamcatcher Forest, and that one
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
really a nightmare in terms of how much intensity I had to put into it to get it done for the deadline. So it was like really like, all right, we need to do over 1,000 outputs, and we love how you're great at variety. So we expect you to have, a lot of variety over 1,000 editions, and we need this. And it was only like 2 weeks. It's something where like there wasn't enough time to really do what I wanted to do. But I had kind of explored other things. So I was like, okay, I kind of have this nature drawing thing I've been playing with. Obviously inspired by Zancan. Again, there's other goats involved where you kind of like see these things that you can try to attempt. And then I had fragments, so I was like, okay, I can kind of use fragments as this kind of back scaffolding, and then put something on top of it, and then I get something kind of new. So anyway, I get all that done. It actually works. I feel safe about the outputs that it's not going to do something too unexpected 1 out of 1,000 times, which is a legitimate concern. I deliver that, and then honestly, like 3 days later, they're like, "Hey, we actually have a bigger opportunity. This one's going to be with Herbert Frank, but again, we need it in like 2 weeks. It's going to be like 1,000 outputs. What can you do?" So
Oof.
then I had to really reach, and then I pulled out Microgravity,
Yeah.
and that was based on. I was a huge fractal forums guy for years and years, and it was kind of just a bunch of experiments and sketches I had played with in kind of the fractal space, but I had never figured out how do you do fractals generatively. Meaning, if I just pick a random XY coordinate, 1 out of 1,000 times it might be a totally black image, or 1 out of 100 times it might be a totally white image. How do I control you know, we need 1,000 out of 1,000 fractals. So then it kind of got me into this idea of using the computer to detect its own aesthetics. So I would create all these random ones and then try to read if you compress this, does it compress down to 0? If so, it's a solid color. If it takes a lot of data to compress it, then it's obviously a very high entropy image. And then you can
Mhm.
kind of start to curate things without really knowing what you're doing. Like I don't have a mathematical proof that lets me generate aesthetic fractals, but I can generate a sample of fractals and then sample those for which ones are likely of being interesting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of as you're going along, you're developing your own tools,
Yeah.
but it's always just one interesting problem after the next that has to be solved.
Yeah. And for you, Ryan, is that part of the what you enjoy? You enjoy like coming up with these complex algorithms and solving these problems that you create? Is that something that um you are you passionate about that? Because I mean, it must be very complicated, especially with those deadlines that you mentioned, that 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Um, so
I mean, it's probably like
it's
working out. Like do you enjoy the feeling of the resistance? And it's like, admittedly, like hard problems are hard, but I do find that kind of I'm compelled to work on them. So in
Mhm.
that sense, like I do love working on kind of one interesting problem to the next. But when you're in it, it very much feels like a difficult problem.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's very exciting. I remember those days because I was on fxhash and they announced their Art Basel collaborations, and then I noticed that you were on multiple, right? You were on both of those collaborations. So I said, wow, how can Ryan create these again high quality collections in such a short period of time? And they are very different from each other. So that was I mean super
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, I
And
definitely had some code that I had been playing with for years
in the
and years and
past,
years,
yeah,
but it had never really seen the light because again, it was kind of like, well, who are you going to show these fractals to? And
yeah,
then it was like, this is the perfect spot where if I just find a way to curate the output to control it, then I can really use this as like an engine for different things. And it was
yeah.
cool. So then again, okay, let's say you solve that. Now the problem was that it took way too long to generate a fractal. So then I had to
Mm.
explore, can I use web workers to do this in parallel such that it draws something like a row of 10 pixels at a time, but it's just it's more and more things you have to kind of solve the deeper you get. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, exactly, like the optimization problem, right? And the speed and the rendering that is
Yes.
actually optimized and
Yeah.
it doesn't break
People
the
care.
phone. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like
No,
even if
that's
it just makes the image, people still care about, but how long did it take to make the image? Which is kind of funny and it's not there with traditional art.
yeah. And what about your code, Ryan? Are you somebody that pays a lot of attention to like the syntax and the order of the code and the all these best practices that exist when you are a coder, or you don't care that much? Because I've seen artists that are on both sides. I feel like, no, my code is
Yeah.
like my studio is a mess, and others are very
Yeah.
methodical, right? What are you in that spectrum?
I definitely like appreciate clean, beautiful code. And I can appreciate it well enough to know that I don't write it. Like I know what my code looks like, and I know what the bar looks like. I know kind of like a finger pointing at the moon, what kind of like what the aspirational code looks like. But I write a lot of spaghetti. Cool thing is now with more and more of these kind of GPT-4 like tools,
Mm.
I can throw spaghetti and it'll kind of turn it into pasta, which is kind of cool.
Mm.
But yeah,
And
I love like I said, that kind of really functional, beautiful code that the code itself can be the work.
hmm and for you, you mentioned the AI assisted, like these new tools. Are you using these tools? Because I've seen Copilot, which is seems to be very helpful, but also like to come up with new things. I
Yeah.
used ChatGPT for that as well. How are you like introducing these tools into your artist, practice, your artistic practice? How are you incorporating those?
It's cool because it's really like I want to say overnight. It's one of those things where AI has been going forever, but then now we just hit the elbow in the curve, where now it's really like it works. Where
Mhm.
before you could kind of try to convince people that it could work in the future, and now it's like, well, if you don't do it, you're at a competitive disadvantage to the people who are using it. So, like my latest, I don't know if it's the latest. It was like two ago, but Ephemeral Tides. On that one, I wanted to do a really efficient. Again, it's kind of like just dialing up the volume to 11 of how do we pack these lines within a flow field that are so tight that there's maybe a pixel between them. But I really just need that done quickly because there's a whole bunch of other layering that goes on, and that's just kind of like a foundation before we do the fun stuff. So anyway, that algorithm for my brain is too complicated. It was like it's a quad tree. You have these different optimization problems where you're kind of doing these different kind of marches to find collisions, and it's just too hard. So I was able to paste like a white paper straight into ChatGPT and then say,
Mm.
this is kind of what I find inspiring. This is where I am. Can you kind of bridge these two gaps? It'll go, okay, sure. And then it'll provide you with something, and then you run that, and you're like, okay, that doesn't work, but I kind of like what you're doing. That actually looked really cool. I'm going to call that, almost packing, and then try again. So then at the end of it, I got a perfect optimized quad tree, performance shape packing algorithm. But then I also got this messed up one that it tried to do but didn't do well. And with that one, things would kind of like overflow the edges just a little bit, and it looked really cool. So then I ended up keeping both,
Mhm.
where it was kind of like a true collaboration of my intent, its interpretation of my intent, and then kind of its optimized version of what I wanted, and kind of its sub optimized version. It was really cool, just working with this, and you can kind of start to see like this is more and more kind of how I want to work.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course because that's open for to everyone, but the trick is how to collaborate with it and then take these small pieces, as you said, like you really like, and being, capable to introduce that to your code. And I mean,
Yeah,
you can debug with it, and it's really, really good. But at the same time, you can hit a wall, right? If you are not really
yeah,
experienced, it can get out of control how to
sure.
package it. So you still need that ability to incorporate certain details, right, from these tools into your work, right?
Yeah, it's like more and more you kind of have to have that like you're curating its outputs, or you're having the
Mhm.
taste of you're the tastemaker of all these different possible things that it could do, thousands and thousands of different directions you can go, and then those branch out, but which one do you select is more and more, I think, becoming the role of the co-pilot. with the AI. It's like at first it was your co-pilot, and now you're maybe its co-pilot.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also for your work as a developer, you're also incorporating it, right? And other developers as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the story of kind of all industries right now. It's just more and more we're having to use AI to stay competitive, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And Ryan, we talked a bit about fxhash. You mentioned Ephemeral Tides, which you released with Proof, right? That was a diamond exhibition. Um, so you also have work. I mean, you released Hyperdrive with Art Blocks, and that was really cool because you
Yeah,
did like A and B side, right? Um,
yeah, that was a
can you
ton of
tell us a
fun.
bit about that?
Yeah, that was my first art blocks release. So as a generative artist, that is kind of the store you want to get in if you're gonna sell generative art. And it took, I think, fxhash to kind of work the craft and then kind of figure out, what the package looks like. And then at Art Blocks, I was able to kind of put that out there and go, hey, check it out.
Yeah.
Here's my first Art Blocks project.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. How does it feel? Like, do you, because I talked to many generative artists, and many of them want to, they want to release on our blogs. Um, is that something that you were working on for a long time, or it was just another, like, one more of your projects? What's your vision like when you look at art blogs, when you look at these different platforms? How do you see them in general?
It was a cool project in that it was a very simple idea that kind of draws back to something I often like to do when I'm sketching my own things or just kind of deep in the weeds is I'm looking for something kind of like a cellular automata or just something that's almost intrinsic to computer science itself. Like it's kind of
Hmm.
in its own language. It doesn't exist, it's not copying nature. It's not copying things from mathematics. It is, it's a cellular automata in a style of cellular automata. So I kind of liked for this one on Artblocks, I had this idea of what if you draw a box and then we take a picture of the box and then we put the picture in the box. And that's the whole algorithm of how this thing creates recursion. So then playing with that a little bit more, I was able to get all the variation out of it. But that distilled idea was just so simple and just so I thought elegant at the time. But then it's kind of funny because working with art blocks is much different than working with fxhash. So with fxhash, there is no hand holding. There is, I mean, maybe now, I'm sure now, maybe you can get your handheld if you want it. But when it first came out, you're on your own. You just kind of log into the back end and you're like, what are all these settings? What are, you know,
Hmm.
all these different configuration options? And then you kind of just publish on your own and then it's out there to the world. Versus for art blocks, someone sets you up in a room and they're like, okay, we're going to set up your project. I want you to click the first field and then type your description. So it is that really kind of white
Okay,
glove
like a
experience
guide,
there.
like a guide.
Exactly, which is nice. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's like it's just a very different vibe. And then you write your description. You go, okay, here's my description to go. Your description's not that great. We'd like you to
Okay.
write another one, which is kind of like on fxhash, you just do whatever you want. Like I could do
Yeah.
all emojis, I could,
Yeah.
whatever I want. But on Artblocks, there's a curator of this is what our Artblocks descriptions look like, consistently across all artists. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. And then, there's a review board. And the review board will determine if you're worthy of being curated. And if you're curated, you'll get all these more, kind of distribution channels and, different clout that
Hmm.
comes with being curated. But it was kind of interesting in that like you're not curated after your work comes out and it's received and reviewed, but like day one, it's like let me see your sketches. All right, not curated.
Okay, so
So
it's
that was just
very
kind of like it was a
early,
little harsher.
very early in the process. Very early in the process, you get a decision. I mean, you can either get rejected, right, or you can go through the presents or curated,
Yeah,
right? Those are the three avenues.
yeah. I mean, you get a nice little like one or two pager back about here's why we decided not to curate. Your art's kind of
Okay.
blurry. We don't get the blur. It's kind of dense. We don't get the density.
Okay.
But it's yeah, just different. Which is cool though, because I mean, it does create. There is someone who thinks about everything that's curated on art blocks versus on fxhash. It's up to the community to try to figure that out, and it takes them a while to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons, I think, for everybody, for collectors and also for artists on both platforms, right? On FXHash, what you experience, right, with your early connections. you were capable of test things and suddenly get all this exposure right out there, and you kind of got confident in what you were doing. And you can do it, as you said, whenever you want it. If you want to drop tomorrow, you can do it. On the other
Yeah.
side, on art blocks, you kind of don't have that
Yes.
that opportunity.
No.
But
No, they're
if
like, this is your
you,
day, and
yeah,
before your day, we want you to do testnet. So like on
yeah,
fxhash, like no testnet, just straight to prod.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But at the same time, that guide on art blocks is kind of cool, right? Because you
Oh
feel like
yeah,
it's not all on you, right? That you get this support. And of course,
totally.
it takes a lot of time, right, to get this the mint day, right, the release day. But
Yeah,
it's a lot of
yeah,
perseverance, right? Like keep
yeah.
working on it.
One's not necessarily better than the other, like the two
Uh,
methodologies, but it's great to have that landscape of these are kind of the different ways the
mhm.
art's getting published.
Right, right. No, that's exciting. And Ryan, I wanted to ask you, because you also were on Verse. We also collaborated for the Blind Gallery. You had a very nice release with the Veal, which also you turned it into a collection on fxhash. So you have worked with many that again, let's call them galleries, marketplaces, and there are many more, right? We see more options coming up. We also see more galleries which are doing more curation. So you have seen all this space. You were there very early in terms of the generative art space. So how do you feel right now, like as an artist? Where is your mind at? Are you looking for a specific platform? Are you focusing on one blockchain, or are you still open to anything? Is it hard to keep track of everything, because again, there are many options out there? So where is your
Totally.
mind at? Where is your mind at in terms of the possibilities for an artist, for a generative artist?
I mean, to some extent, as we kind of reach this kind of multi-chain environment, there's a little bit of a dilution of attention, meaning like before Ethereum was NFTs and you had all of the attention on like OpenSea, versus now there's ordinals, or there's whatever's going on Solana. It's kind of becoming more fractionalized across all the different places. And so I'm paying attention to more places. So it's just more and more you have to kind of keep up with, and more options you have to kind of prioritize of, if I'm going to do, a new music based NFT, where would that go? So
Mm-hmm.
it's different things that I'd like to explore within the medium itself, but then also different things I'm excited about in terms of just the distribution channels. Like for me, one of the most interesting ones right now is what EmProps is doing, the
Mm-hmm.
emergent properties from these kind of, what are they,
Yeah.
stable diffusion based for now, but it's open enough that it could be other generative models. So the idea is basically like, how do you take something like pure generative art where the image is only from the explicit code you gave it, and then how do you give just a little bit more control to AI? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I would before just draw a circle, where now I can say it is a circle in this exact position, but we're going to do image to image translation to, animal faces or whatever, and then I can run that through like a diffusion model. And then it really starts to take generative art into this AI frontier, which is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great use case that you mentioned. And I always thought, I mean, for those that are not familiar, right, with them props, it's basically a long form. So you can release long collections, so a collection with 100, 200, 300 pieces. And they come out of stable diffusion. So you, as an artist, what you control at this stage, I believe, is the prompts, right? And you get access to a studio
Sort of.
or.
Yeah, you get the prompting, but you can also run P5 code under it. So you have the
Ah.
prompting. And what's really cool is the prompting has variables in it, and the variables are probabilistic. So I can say, draw a 4K, sketch of a, you know, dollar sign, animal. And then dollar sign animal could be 20% dogs, 80% cats. And then we
Mhm.
get kind of these rarity levels within prompting. But then it can
Okay.
also do that kind of image to image diffusion. I don't know what it's called, of being able to take your P5 code as the suggestion or as like some kind of loss function that
Mhm.
ties into that kind of prompting, to where you do get kind of these controllable AI generations. And then you can control like what's the strength of that knob. Is it 90% going by the prompt, or is it 90% going by my P5 code? And then sometimes you
Okay.
find a balance there. But
Yeah.
they put a lot of really interesting ideas into it. But you can also tell like they were quick to publish, which is cool too. So you can tell like it's going to be a fast moving experimental kind of. I
Yeah.
get fxhash vibes.
Yes, and they started on Tesos. They released a couple of collections, like curated collection with a specific artist, and now they are going to release on Ethereum. And they have an interesting way of, it's like they have this artist studio, and it's like a subscription, right? Which is pretty interesting because artists at the end of the day are benefiting. They are monetizing the art, and what they did is they charge a subscription to artists, right, to access the studio, and they then work on their art, which is very
Right?
different from everything we have seen. And I think that was a smart. Um, and yeah, that's EmProps. I didn't know about the coding, that it was already so
Yeah.
advanced on the coding side. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought even just having the variables inside the prompt was just something I hadn't really seen before. That was just cool. It's like obvious once you see it, but
Yeah.
before then I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, and that can evolve even more, right? I was thinking that maybe. So I had Ivona Tao was in the podcast, and she has released so many AI collections, and she's a machine learning
Oh yeah,
researcher.
she's
So
great.
yeah, and she creates her own models, and she was thinking, she was mentioning how she takes the photographs and she curates her own photographs, and that's the input to the
Right.
algorithm, and then she has different neural networks. So I always thought, like, okay, so EmProps can actually do something like that, where you can actually input the photographs in that case, so you can curate the input that you take, and you can have some control over the models, right? Like the neural networks,
Yeah.
how they behave. You can train them there. And of course, it's not easy, right? Right now, they are using stable
No.
diffusion, but it could eventually become something like that. We'll see, but I see both fields merging, right? Like generative coded art and generative AI art feels like they could converge into one. Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's ultimately just making it easier for people to create kind of in that space
Mhm.
where, before, I mean, I'm talking like a year ago, you had to probably be really good at coding and really good at Photoshop, where now it's just tell the computer what you want and it'll do it. And then it's just getting
Yeah,
better at doing that.
right. Yeah, the tools are getting much more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Um, that's interesting.
Yeah, I've read
And
it's almost like it has to become more sophisticated to make it easier for people. Like we just didn't have the compute before for it to be this easy, which is kind of
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Very interesting. I didn't expect to talk about them props, but you're right. Like now, they are doing a great job.
Yeah.
Um,
Even
and
the
right,
tokenomics are pretty interesting. Like I think they're doing there's a couple member tokens that are closed. Like there's only 100 editions, and if you hold one of those, you'll get lifetime access, I think, to the studio, which is an
mhm.
attempt to kind of provide utility to what otherwise would just be the earliest experiments, which is like a cool idea
Uh,
of like if you support our earliest experiments, you will get utility, in the right
okay,
spots, which is a cool idea.
nice. Yeah, it's like a lifetime membership, right? And it also shows that you were there from the beginning, right? Like you were a
Right, yeah.
supporter.
Lisa
Yeah,
Orth was there.
yeah. I saw
She
I
did
saw her
the
collection.
yeah, she did the old the original like Nirvana logo,
Yeah,
and then she's right here on a membership token.
yeah. No, exciting stuff. And Ryan, what would you do if you were starting today, right? If you were an emerging artist, and with all these options, all these blockchains, marketplaces, galleries, technology, right? AI, pure AI, generative art, and you're a creative person, let's say somebody that's new to the space, what would you tell them? Like, where should they focus on? How will they start? What will be your first step in this space today?
Just having watched the way social kind of grew up, I see this analogy of the early mover advantage of if you're on these networks early, then you're able to kind of build up your network for the people that are coming after you. and it really does give you that advantage. Now, the downside is you never know which of these platforms is going to take off. Is it going to be Twitter, or is it going to be, whatever else?
Yeah.
So I think now is that time of seeing these new platforms come online. And it is kind of up to these artists, I think, to get in there and start creating compelling works kind of ahead of other people. So that would kind of be my advice: is it pays to be early, and it pays to put out quality early if you can.
Right. So it's like try to make a solid guess from what you are seeing into what could be a lasting technology, right? And then focus on that platform, release high quality work
Right.
on that platform, right? Yeah.
If you wait for validation, you might have waited too long, because then somebody else already captured that early mover advantage, and they've already kind of beat you to a lot of kind of the bounty there.
Yeah, exactly. And well, we mentioned EmProps. Um, any other thing you are interested or like excited about, Ryan, these days, like in terms of emerging platforms, technologies, blockchains? Where is your mind at in terms of that in innovations?
I mean, it just feels like it just keeps accelerating.
Yeah.
The elbow in the curve just keeps becoming more vertical. So more and more, just kind of curious and interested in how to use LLMs and LMMs and just various strong AI tools that are just dropping. Like, it feels like every week you get a new tool. Like
Yeah.
Grok. What does Grok come out like next week or something like that? That's supposed to be like
Yeah.
the latest, like GPT-4 plus. It's
Yes.
GPT-4 with vibes, which
Yeah.
would be cool.
With vibes. Yeah, that's the one from Elon, right? From X. They are releasing.
Yeah,
Is it Grok? Grok with G? Grok? Something
Jig.
like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something
Yeah.
crazy
That's
too. Like, they only trained it for 2 months, and it's already, it's going to be great.
right.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
And in we had Clown Vamp, which is well, he's very a popular collector. He was in the podcast, but he's an artist as well. He's focusing a lot on AI, and he had some crazy ideas on the future of the medium. He was thinking about how AI will let you create these sort of experiences. He's already doing a lot of storytelling with AI, but
yeah,
the next level, and what's coming is more like experiences, stories like movies and films, and this
yeah.
whole the spectrum of
Have you
creations. It's
seen like the generative South Parks, where you just kind of throw a couple prompts at it and it'll give you a whole
no,
episode?
no, no, no,
It's
no.
amazing. So like, it has like an internal model of Cartman, it has an internal model of, Stan and Common, story arcs. And then you just
Okay.
kind of tell it what you want to see, and it's able to animate the characters and
Wow.
give you a whole episode on demand, which kind
Wow,
of gives you a glimpse of, where things are going with music. If I can say, give me a Kanye cover of this Taylor Swift song, and it's just
yeah.
fire.
Yeah, and even like films, right? Like you can tell the AI to create a storyline, then you as you intervene a bit and you edit it, and then it will come to a point where the graphics will be as good as they are in the best movies today. So we could
Yeah,
see you don't need actors that, to be honest, you can create voices, you can create
yeah,
crazy worlds. So it will be like a one person movie. It will be like possible, right? So
yeah.
it's going
No, I have
going
no
to
idea
be,
where it's going, but I'm just super excited to be in it.
yeah.
Like, there's just so many new possibilities that it's kind of opening and simplifying. Like, as a musician, like, something that I've always struggled with is, how do you, like, once you have your music on the page, how do you really produce it and EQ it and master it and make it sound like a record? And my ears have never been great at that. I just tend to make it louder and louder and louder until finally
Yeah.
everything's so loud. But with AI now, there's some great tools where you can just say, analyze, this album and do what they did to mine. And then it'll just re-EQ everything, and then just allow you to kind of be on that same platform as the people, who have
The best
maybe more
equipment.
experience, or yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. More equipment. Just, it lets you kind of get on that equal playing field. So it's kind of like an equalizer.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there is the problem, right? Like what many people are against is the stealing from others, right? And when it comes to
Yep.
music,
Yep.
from
That's another
singers
huge
and
problem.
their
Yeah.
voice, and it's
Yep,
tricky, right? It's very tricky, and then you get into the issue of rights, right? Like copyrights, and
totally.
yeah, how will people control that? It's very tricky, right? So yeah, will be challenging. We'll see. I've seen many, Post Malone, the popular singer. He was saying, I got like 1 year, 1 more year, then AI will take over my job. So he's like, this
Yeah.
might be my last album. And then,
Yeah,
yeah,
I see that like it's making things like technically easier, but at the same time, I feel like when you collect art, you're often collecting from an individual and you're
yeah,
buying into their story, but not necessarily that that technical. Like when you buy like Nike shoes, you don't care about like, well, these have the greatest soles compared to Reebok shoes. I want the Nikes. They have the Nike brand, so it really I think starts to play more into brand and then just the
Mhm.
artist. But
Right,
more and more people have the tools to, if they want to create something in the style of, say Nike in that instance, anyone can put out a Nike looking shoe, but like only Nike is Nike, which
yeah.
ties in beautifully to blockchain and like verifiable reputation,
Mm.
um, that whole provenance.
Right. A way to, guarantee this came from Ryan because this is his
Right.
wallet signed
Yeah.
and it's next to
Anyone
his
can do work
other.
that looks like Beeple, but we collect Beeple.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
huge difference. And I think a lot of people confuse that of like, well, anyone can create something that looks like X, except, X is made by X and people care about that.
Yeah. That's totally makes sense. And um, in terms of physical exhibitions, because in the generative art space, many artists have been showcased by institutions, or now we got the big news that Rafik, Anadol, well, he had a long exhibition at the MoMA, and he
Oh
was
yeah,
recently
beautiful.
collected. Yeah, beautiful. It's great because
Now
it's
he's at the
AI.
Sphere.
Yeah, at the Sphere. Yeah, and it's I mean, what I think is great is it's AI but also an NFT, so it validates kind of both mediums, right? So
That's a
that's
good
great
point. Yeah.
for the space. um but for you, Ryan, do you look at these, is your goal to at some point be on a museum or in a great exhibition, this from the traditional art world, or you're somebody that you care more about the digital space and the digital culture? What is it? How does it how do you, what are you looking for in those terms, or you haven't thought about that yet?
It's probably, I would imagine, for artists coming from the two respective worlds, what's exciting is crossing over. So for me, coming from digital, traditional looks exciting, and I'm sure for traditional people, maybe digital looks exciting. But it is cool more and more as that kind of merges, where you see huge, projectors in a traditional space, and it's playing kind of this digital work
Mhm.
outside of it, or what you can do with plotters, where you like Mapan's, a wizard at that, where you and Zancan, where you have kind of
Yeah.
these pure digital worlds that kind of escape into the physical, and then we can kind of celebrate them on kind of a big traditional canvas. For
Yeah.
me, that's super exciting, and I would love to kind of explore that,
uh yeah, yeah.
where I kind of
And
feel like I kind of get
physical.
the digital by default.
Yeah, it's like a new exploration for you, right? It's like, okay, this is something new. Producing physical work, digital. I mean, it's like a combination of both, but it's different. Yeah. And what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on prints? On prints against plotters? Do you have any? Do you like one more than the other, or you're fine with both?
Um, Fine with both. Plotters are so cool though.
Yeah.
Like plotter really does feel like a hand drawn, hand painted. Everyone is going to be slightly different, just because like the machines aren't they're not perfect.
Yeah.
So often like you're running out of ink midway through the plot, or it did this weird pooling on this one part that it was trying to sketch, where you do kind of get those imperfections where every edition 105 will look different than another edition 105, which is kind of cool. So I love that idea and that aesthetic of kind of those imperfections, making it just feel a little more organic.
Yeah. Yeah, and also it's a great way to show digital art in a way, right? Because then you can explain, yeah, well, there was code behind this piece, and then that usually attracts people to computer art in a way. but it's physical.
Yeah.
You can hang it on a wall, and you can show it to your friends. So it's a good way to, bridge both worlds.
Yeah.
Um,
And really good, like really top tier plotter art is really hard to make, where it does have that kind of selection of like, okay, first you have to be, you have to be a great artist. You also have to be a great coder. And then you have to solve all the problems of kind of combining those and working with a plotter, where,
yeah,
it's just a handful of people that have really like pulled it off at like museum quality. And I think that's going to be a barrier for a long time, for collectors looking for things that obviously took a lot of care to produce. I feel
mhm.
like generative plotter art is one of like the hardest aesthetic, computer science art forms you can kind of put out there.
Yeah, and especially like big plotters, right? Because you need the special machines. I saw
It takes
Zancan.
time.
Yeah, I saw Zancan exhibition in New York City. It was amazing. They had this. I think it was, what was the name? It was Artmatr. I think it was Artmatr. They had these huge machines. It was very impressive, and during the exhibition, it was working, right? So it was working.
Yeah,
It was kind of on default mode, doing a plot, and yeah, it was fantastic. But
yeah,
yeah, you're right. There is like a small barrier there to create this kind of art, which makes it interesting, right, for those that actually make it and are capable of conquering that. um, Ryan, we have been chatting for almost an hour. I know you have a cold, and just
yeah,
have one last question. And I usually ask to all guests, who are your inspirations, like top three inspirations or top three emerging artists or rising artists or established artists? So three names that inspire you.
I think. I mean, as I mentioned, Zancan in the plotter space is such a good name to know, and such a great body of works to kind of explore and just kind of see what's possible. And like I said, that's for me, that's some of the hardest work to produce. So definitely Zancan. William Mapan, his stuff just it has that his stuff is in his own style and just done at the highest level. So love his work, and I think Zach Lieberman is also
Hmm.
equally inspiring to the others that I've mentioned. His
Yeah,
stuff is just again, it's very much in his own style, and very he takes it so much farther than it looks maybe at first.
yeah, yeah. And Zach has been doing it for a while as well. He has this daily routine, right, where he shares works and works every day. So
Yeah.
that's
And you see kind of the gears, just kind of iterating and getting deeper and deeper into whatever the essence of, that first sketch is. It's cool to watch it all develop. Like he's
right.
been doing this one where it's just kind of these little noodles that kind of float up. But I swear I've been seeing like variations on that noodle for like 3 months. So it's like, wow, that's really cool. Like, then another one's like, oh dang, that's even better. Then you just keep
Yeah,
watching. Like he's really working it.
yeah. He's iterating over it. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah. So those were amazing names. Some of the top, the best generative. I don't know if the word is best, but some of the most talented, right?
Yeah.
Generative
Yeah,
artists.
maybe these are like two of the easy, obvious three, but these are, yeah, definitely guys I find super inspiring.
Yeah, awesome. Ryan, thanks so much. This was very interesting, and thanks for sharing all your story, right? And hope
Yeah,
you get better. Hope you get better soon,
thank you.
and hope we can chat in the future to see where we are
Yep,
in
this
terms
was
of AI.
super fun. Oh no. Yeah, we'll see. All right.
Thanks. Bye bye, Ryan. Take
Yep.
care.
Later.